So we're here with Jocelyn Lucas, the Director of JL Conveyancing. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thank you for having me.
So Jocelyn, you run a conveyancing company. So what is a conveyancer?
So basically, a conveyancer legally represents either a vendor, being the seller, or a purchaser with their property transaction. So we facilitate the process from contract signing through to settlement. So we're there to protect the client's legal interest and ensure that they fulfill all their legal obligations under the contract.
Fantastic. And how did you get into this? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, I completed a law degree back in 2000. Then found myself working in a law firm in their property area. I then was exposed to conveyancing and decided that was what I wanted to do. I then obtained a role within Stockland. So I was there as a conveyancing manager for 10 years, and then decided that the role wasn't challenging anymore and decided to open up my own practice. So I've been doing this on my own for about 5 years, and yeah, loving every minute.
Fantastic. So can you talk us through a little bit about the process involved and when should a buyer or a seller, I suppose, but in this case, I suppose we're talking about more buyers, engage your services?
I would suggest as soon as they enter the property market to find the perfect property for themselves, it's a good idea to appoint a conveyancer at the time to establish a relationship, ensure that the conveyancer can turn around a contract review within a timely manner, and also to discuss the fees applicable for the transaction as well. So as soon as possible that is what I would recommend.
So some of the points that you touched on, I suppose, leads me into my next question. What should a buyer seek, or what sort of questions should they ask when choosing the right conveyancer?
How long they have been practicing for, whether they're licensed. I would also recommend asking them if they're familiar with the property type that you're purchasing. So if they're familiar with purchasing vacant land, off the plan apartments, just to ensure that you're not left with someone that's inexperienced with the property type that you are buying. Also, check that they are actually licensed by going on the Business Licensing Authority website, and just give them a call and make sure that you do have a good relationship with them from the onset, and that they do review the contract in a timely fashion to ensure that they're looking out for your legal requirements. And
good advice, Jocelyn. So basically, when a buyer is looking at let's say an off the plan or a block of land, what are some of the key considerations or milestones within the process, I suppose?
Sure. First step is to ensure that you do receive a pre-approval. So contact your broker and ensure that you sit down with them, do the number crunching, see what your budget is. The next step is the contract signing, but before you sign the contract, ensure you do contact your conveyancer to review the contract, so that you know what you are signing. The amount of people that come to us after they have signed, it really surprises me. So it is good to get good legal advice and ensure that you're aware of what you're purchasing. For example, are there any easements on that block of land? Is it anything that will factor you being able to build your dream home on that land?
Yep. So you touched on some of the risks, I suppose. So if a buyer did not engage a conveyancer, what are some of the risks that are involved?
Well, the risk is you're entering into a legal contract and not being able to fulfill the legal obligations under that contract. So, for example, if you do sign a contract and place a deposit on a property, you risk losing that deposit if you are unable to settle on the property. So, it is, the deposit can vary anywhere between sort of $1,500 to $20,000-$30,000. So it is a lot of money. So you just want to ensure that that you are protected, and I cannot emphasize enough to make sure you receive legal advice before you enter into a contract.
And understanding some of those fine print terms that may not be in plain English, I suppose, is the key,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
Exactly.
So talk us through some of the different parties that you get involved in dealing with during the transaction process.
So on a typical purchase transaction, we would deal with the vendor's conveyancer or solicitor. We would also deal with your broker and your financier as well. So what we do is we basically coordinate the conveyancing transaction from contract signing through to settlement.
Fantastic. And you mentioned finance clause.
Yes.
So what is that and why is it important?
Well, what we do when we do receive an inquiry relating to a purchase of a property, we emphasise that the contract should be signed subject to finance. And ultimately what that means is that it protects the deposit that you put down on the property. So the clause is there to protect you and your deposit, to ensure that you receive formal loan approval, so then you can proceed to settlement. So if for some reason you are unable to receive finance approval within that finance period, you are entitled to a full refund of your deposit. So that's why it is very important, and it should be closely monitored by your broker and your conveyancer.
Okay, and I suppose that's where the broker plays a large part in communicating in that phase of the transaction.
The broker plays a pivotal role in all of this. They basically, when a conveyancer receives a contract and provides that to the broker, you then have a date that you need to work towards, the finance due date. So the broker, if they need more time, would communicate that through to your conveyancer to ensure that if any finance extensions are requested within that time frame. The risk of not doing so will mean that the contract becomes unconditional, which means it's no longer reliant on that finance clause, which means that you could lose your deposit. So it is very important.
So it's of course important that the broker works closely with the conveyancer to make sure that those aspects of the purchase are taken care of?
Yes, definitely. You need a team behind you when you're purchasing property. You need to make sure that the broker and the conveyancer are good communicators, ultimately to protect your interest in the transaction, so that if there is a finance extension that is required or a settlement extension, that does get requested. So you have the best possible chance of avoiding any legal issues with the purchaser.
Yep, well that sounds like great advice. And is there any particular area that you focus in as a conveyancer in terms of property? What sort of areas of property do you sort of manage?
Yeah, sure. So in Victoria, we JL Conveyancing hold a license to undertake conveyancing works in this state. So we can do anything from acting for a seller or a buyer in terms of any property transactions. So being vacant land, apartments, established houses, we can pretty much do it all.
Fantastic. That's a very wide variety of properties that you handle. And can you just talk us through the process of settlement? Is there anything important that a buyer needs to be aware of when approaching that important time frame?
Yeah, sure. So when you are closer to settlement, you basically need to ensure that your loan documents have been signed and your legal documents have been signed. And once the legal documents have been signed, they have been sent to your conveyancer, and the loan documents have been returned back to the bank. It's also a good idea to ensure that you have discussed with your broker and conveyancer as to how to treat the shortfall of funds. And what I mean by shortfall is the amount that you as a buyer need to contribute to the settlement. So it's important to discuss that, because often that information is only relayed to the conveyancer 1 or 2 days prior to settlement. So you may need to take time off work to organise a bank check. So that's a crucial part of the process to ensure that the funds, that you do have the necessary funds to complete the settlement.
So communication is very, very important.
Very important. And also you are entitled to one final inspection. So it is important 7 days preceding to settlement, you do go and inspect your property just to ensure there are no issues. And basically you're purchasing the property as is at the time of the initial inspection of that property. So one of the advice that we give to buyers when they're purchasing established is ensure that the goods are all in working order. So check the oven, check the garage door is working, because ultimately you are accepting the property as in its current state.
Fantastic. Well, if you need a great conveyancer, try JL Conveyancing. Jocelyn Lucas, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.